Hello there, welcome to this Leggett International Real Estate Webinar. This is an Alps special. My name is Andy Davies and let's do that again. I'm your host for this next hour with a whole group of experts who are hoping to help you in your quest for finding a holiday home or a permanent home here in France, in the Alps. What I will do, as we always do with these webinars, is I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves and then we'll get straight into the questions. So let's start with Heather, please.
Hello everybody, my name's Heather Byrne. I'm the regional manager for the Rhone Alps and the Haute Alps, which contains really the biggest ski resorts in France and indeed in some parts of the world, as well as some of the largest lakes as well. So I have good fortune to work here.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Let's go to Fiona.
Hello everyone, my name is Fiona Mougenot. And I have been working in what we call global mobility for about 25 years now, and I am an immigration expert. So I'm the person who can get you visas, permits when you've found your beautiful home in the Alps.
Okay, thank you. And let's go to Jason, please. Hello, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Porter. I'm a director with Blevins Franks. We specialise in giving financial and tax advice to people who are looking to relocate to France and a number of other countries in Europe.
And there is another man there called Andrew.
Andrew Morgan. Hi, I'm one of the agents in the Haute-Savoie region. So if I throw out a couple of local resorts of Chamonix and Megève, those are probably names people have heard of. I live slap bang in the middle in Saint-Gervais at the foot of Mont Blanc. And hopefully, I know the Alps very, very well. I've been in the area 35 years. So I suppose I have a good knowledge of the 4 alpine departments as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's say hello to Paulette.
Hi, I'm Paulette Booth, the co-founder and manager of Agence AXA International. Although AXA is all over France, we're actually a specialised agency covering the whole of France for Anglophones. For anybody who wants or needs an English-speaking service, we offer all insurances for your, whether it be a holiday home, main home, and also we can open a bank account with AXA Bank.
Okay, thank you. And a regular panel member is Jonathan.
Hello everyone, yes, my name is Jonathan Watson. I'm Associate Director at Lumon. We're a foreign exchange specialist specialising in the international property market. We can help with anything to do with transferring money in and out of France. So thank you for attending this evening. One of the things we like to do at the moment is just ask our viewers some questions in terms of where they are in the process of looking in France, and just trying to get some data together really on what sort of stage people might be at. As you all know, it doesn't happen overnight, purchasing an overseas property, so it's handy for us just to get some of the timescales that people are working towards, just for us to try and better understand some of the information that we can provide. So that's very kind of you. Thank you for responding to that poll. I'm just going to launch another one now, just to understand a little bit more about the finance aspect, certainly with the currency exchange element. So that's what Lumon specialise in, the international payments. Understanding the different options with finance can be very important. You've got exchange rates to take into consideration, and understanding the timing of the markets and where you are in that process can be very important. So thank you for everyone to responding there, and I'll pass back to Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. You will see on your screen as it comes up that all the details of our panel members, their email addresses, etc. So after this webinar, if there are any burning questions, you can ask them. We have questions that have been submitted, but if you do have a question this evening, and if I can get to it, I will do my best to ask that question. There is a question box on your screen. You can ask that question, and I will do my best to do it. But obviously, the first thing is we have questions that have been submitted, so let's get amongst them. Let's start with Heather. Heather, Sally Turnbull says she's interested in purchasing a holiday home in the Alps region. Can you talk us through the purchasing process in France? You need to put your mic on.
Thank you. Hello, Sally. Well, thank you for that question. It's huge. Let me do my best to condense that down for you a little bit. So first of all, it must be said that the buying process in France is extremely well governed. There's lots and lots of legal background and support to the buying process in France. and Leggett obviously are going to help you with that. So let's start at the very beginning. So the very first thing that happens if you find a property that you like and you want to put an offer in, we will have a contract with the vendor to sell that property, so that's all legal. And then we will ask you and the vendor to both sign a preliminary, we call it a letter d'intention d'achat, but it's actually a basic letter offer just to outline the terms of the sale. Once that's in, we collect all the documents from yourself and the vendor, and then that all goes to either our head office where we have an in-house contracts department with our own notaire, or to an outside notaire to create what we call a compromis de vente, which is really like a reservation contract. And so that's the next stage. And again, that lays out all the terms. Perhaps it's a mortgage clause, perhaps there's a planning clause, whatever it is, it will be contained within. You'll get diagnostics at that point about the house, so you'll know exactly what's going on. And then once that's signed, the notaire's office starts to make their legal checks. Things like are the people selling the rightful people to sell? Is there anything going on in the immediate area that you should be informed of? For example, pylons going up or something like that. And also they talk to the local council office and make sure that there's going to be no issues about change of ownership or anything like that. So everything is done, and then once that's all cleared and the finance is in, then a final acte de vente is signed, which is the final contract, and then that's it. Money's transferred, and you are now the legal owner of your property. That is it, the buying process in a very, very small nutshell. We're happy to talk that through with you in more depth. If you'd like more information, do let Andy know or drop a message into the chat and someone will call you and go through it in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Let's go to you, Fiona. A question about the dreaded visa. Polly Gibb wants to know, how difficult is it to get a residence permit to live and start a business in France? Your microphone, Fiona.
Right. Thank you for the question, Polly. It's not very difficult, but you've got to have a very good business plan. That's really the key if you're opening a business here. And there are going to be different steps that you have to set up a company first, or you're going to be registered as an entrepreneur, and you have to have a first step preliminary approval on that before you go into the visa question. Now, there are lots and lots of visa possibilities for those who have professional lives and their own business as well. There are 11 categories. Not all 11 are going to be actually for a business owner, but there are about 3 or 4. And normally what we do at CUM is that we will always run you through an assessment, first of all, to find the best strategy and the most suitable visa option. But it's not too difficult. We have a lot of British business people who are opening businesses here.
Have you found, Fiona, that since Brexit that it's become less popular for people to do it, or are they shying away a bit more, or is it just because
much more popular?
Much more popular. Okay.
Much more popular, because I think now with Brexit and due to Brexit, there are a lot of business people who have been doing or want to do business in Europe, and then they need to have a base here, whether it's in France or elsewhere. But we've had a huge increase.
Okay, great, thank you. Jason, let's go to a question about the tax process. Belinda Marshall Bradbury wants to know, can you explain the tax process of living in France, but having rental income in the UK and France?
Yeah, basically what you're looking at is that the UK rental income will always be taxable in the UK. So that continues to be taxed here, but obviously if you've moved to France, then that may well be your only source of UK income. So you will have your personal allowances, etc., that can be set off against that first, and then you'll move into the 20% rate band, 40% rate band, etc. So it may well be, if previously you had other income or you were earning when you were living in the UK, that your actual liability on that rental income in the UK has reduced from a UK perspective. In France, it will be taxable there because as a French tax resident, if you move there, you're liable on a worldwide basis. But the way the French deal with UK rental income is to include it within the tax calculation, but put in then a credit for what would have been the tax and social charges you would have paid on it. So effectively, you don't have anything to pay on it. They give you a credit for what the liability would have been. And that's even if the liability in the UK was negligible or zero. So they're giving you a credit that doesn't really exist. What it does mean is that other income that might well be be taxable on you in France could actually end up paying a higher rate on that, because obviously including the UK rental income in there pushes those other incomes into higher rates in France. So that's that situation. If you have rental income in France itself, then there are a number of different ways it can be taxed. They have 3 or 4 different tax regimes which start out being delineated on the basis of the level of rental income you have there. Relatively different systems, different regimes, different tax regimes. They do also have a professional landlord scheme, which if the rental income in France is above a certain level and it's more than 50% of your overall income, then you can be assessed as a professional landlord, which then can potentially get you into the social charge system in France, which can then get you into the French healthcare system. That's a swings and roundabout situation, but it's great for getting the French healthcare for free or for the majority of the costs covered, but then potentially you will then be paying social charge and other items, potentially things like pensions, etc. So it's a kind of, you need to look at the numbers and see if it's actually worthwhile going down that route. But yeah, that's the situation there.
And of course, as we've said, Jason, if there are people who have burning questions, your details will come up later, and people at Blevins Franks can help try and answer those questions.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to Andrew. Andrew, Tony Watson wants to know, what is the best area or resort in the Alps region to buy in?
How long have I got? I think it very much depends on what you're looking for. I can't say that one resort is better than another resort, or one region department is better than another. I think the questions I ask my clients, and we all ask our clients, we're all very passionate about our region because we live in the town which we work in. In my case, over 20 years and 35 years in the Alps, so I do know the way around. Are you going to use it in the ski season? Are you going to come in the summer? Are you a cyclist? Are you a mountaineer, a walker? Do you have family? Do you have kids? How old are the kids? So I think that we would ask the right questions and try to find out what your usage is. For sure, if you want ski to the door convenience and you're only going to use it in the winter season, there are some fantastic resorts perched up high. You know, let's deal with the elephant in the room. I chose to live where I live because it's a town it's a little market town in France. We also are in the 3rd largest ski area in France. But I live here year round. A lot of my clients visit year round. They buy it for the winter and then discover that, hang on, there's quite a lot to do in the summer, isn't there? Doesn't matter whether it's, you know, walking, cycling, going to the lakes, or, you know, I have a lot of clients that use it as a base and then go off elsewhere into Europe. You know, the whole of the Alps is, you know, Italy's 30 minutes away in most cases. 30 minutes, maybe an hour is some of the bigger places. But don't forget, in the summer, you go over the mountains and you're into Italy. So it gives you the access to the Med. Really depends what time of year you're using it, whether you're ski or snowboard, or if, as I say, it's a year-round mountain destination that you want to use, in which case, but you know, I think the fact that we have agents in all areas, from the high altitude resorts of Tignes and Val d'Isère to the village resorts of Saint-Gervais, where I am, Samoine, which is very, very popular, and also going through and towards the Italian side, Serre-Chevalier, Briançon. It really depends what you're looking for. So I'm afraid that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but we'd ask our clients the right questions to establish what might be the most appropriate for them.
Can I just ask, Andrew and Heather as well, then, in your 35 years, Andrew, do you find that there are places that become more trendy because of, I don't know, because of perhaps film locations or whatever, or are there places that have always been sort of solid in the sales process of property buying? If that makes sense.
I'm going to let Heather answer.
Oh, okay. Pressure's on.
I brought up the gin. Hey, carry on.
Well, they're absolutely perennial favourites. You know, the Trois Vallées, Maribel, Courchevel, they've been long established. Val d'Isère, Tignes, long established, high, massive links in them. But we've found that over the years, we've other areas have come into play. Places like the Vallée de Maurienne, places like Vosges, where actually it's a very much all year round place to buy, slightly lower, so slightly shorter season, but massive summer activities as well. Massive de Bauge, you have Lac de Bourget on one side, Lac d'Annecy on the other side. It's a beautiful place to live. So those are what I would call up and coming areas, even though they're fairly low. And I would also say that actually areas that Saint-Gervais, Andrew's area, has been a sort of gem over the last 20 years. That's been really up and coming area with Samoin and all of those areas. Would you agree, Andrew?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I think, again, one of the other questions probably, and perhaps due to popularity, is also access. The Chamonix Valley, as we call it, from Geneva to Chamonix, you know, you get in a car and you really are an hour to your resort, maximum. We've got a brilliant fast train link direct from Geneva to Saint-Gervais. And we're getting more and more people saying, well, look, why don't we buy something in what I will call in the valley, in one of the small towns. Bourg-Saint-Maurice, for those that know it, is an example where you have access to Val d'Isère, Tignes, Sainte-Foy, La Rosière, Les Arcs, Le Plan, huge ski areas, and yet you also have the hustle and bustle of a town, a little town where people live, and you know, you can come there in May or October and there's still people around. That's exactly the case with where I am. As I say, it was what was appealing to us. It wasn't a ski resort per se, whilst we have a good area. And the access, as I say, access for a lot of people, you know, being able to get to an international airport, be it Lyon, be it Grenoble, or be it Geneva, is a consideration as well. So
and increasingly the TGV has put on more and more services out here, and that's made a huge difference as well. And that comes into Lyon, it comes in all the way to Bourg-Saint-Maurice, as Andrew said earlier, to Saint-Gervais as well. So it's a massive bonus to have trains coming into this area too.
Great, thank you both. Let's go to Paulette. Paulette, Dave Grimes wants to know, can we get prescriptions filled in France that are written by our US doctor until our long-term visas are granted?
I would say that very much depends on the pharmacy. Technically, no, but you'll probably find, you know, some pharmacists who are happy to. However, you will pay for those prescriptions. I would probably recommend they're going to see a local doctor who will then write the prescription onto a French ordonnance. And then you can go along to the pharmacy and get your medication. Don't be surprised when you move to France as well, if you've got long-term conditions, that you go to a local GP and they want to actually re-diagnose you, which is quite normal. They just want to run lots of tests and things and kind of re-diagnose you, so to speak. The benefit of that can be that if you've got a long-term illness, there are certain long-term illnesses in France. If you go to the AMELI website, which is AMELI.fr, on there you can find a list of all of those long-term illnesses, and basically any treatment that you have for those, if you're in one of those categories, is free. But that's from when you've got your social security number in France. I know we're actually talking about until you've got your long-term visa granted. This is more when you've got your social security number. But until you've got your social security number and you're just here, yeah, pay for your own healthcare, and yeah, as I say, I would definitely recommend getting your prescription put onto a French prescription. It would just make life a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, let's ask a question about the dreaded money, because we obviously need it to be able to buy a property. Keith Saunderson wants to know, if I work with a currency specialist like Lumon to buy my euros, how can I be sure that my money is secure?
Okay, yeah, on something a bit more serious after the hearing the lovely stories about different places you can buy in the Alps, and quite topical at the moment, of course, with the news of Silicon Valley Bank and some concerns there. So Lumon, we're known as what's called an e-money institution, electronic money. So it's a level of regulation passed from the Financial Conduct Authority, and it basically relates to how we look after client funds. So any client funds that are sent to us, so if you're buying euros, you'd send us pounds or dollars perhaps, and then we'd purchase euros and send them out. So money you've sent us, whatever currency, any currency we're sending out, it's all held in a segregated client account. So it's very similar to, say, a solicitor or other sort of institutions who will hold money on behalf of their clients. And money in those bank accounts is actually separate from our normal business funds. So it's a client account, it's often referred to as, that's what they are. Separate accounts from our business accounts, and were anything to happen to our business, your money always remains separate. So, I mean, Lumon, we've been trading since 2000. Last year we turned over £4.5 billion. So a very large entity. We're actually backed by a private equity firm based in London, part of a wider group of companies working in the financial services sector. So yeah, there's extra levels of sort of governance and reporting that would go on. That's the sort of legal protection, if you like, there. We can certainly discuss that in more detail, provide any relevant statements, etc., if anyone was interested. You've also got the softer sort of protections, if you like, the fact that we're working with LEGGETT IMMOBILIER, a very well-established estate agency. They're obviously going to have done their checks and recommend us with real confidence. So yeah, certainly any matters of security, very happy to talk that through with a client. It's well, not just relevant today, it's always a very relevant issue to discuss. And yeah, we'll always want to put clients' minds at ease. We're dealing often with people's life savings, so it's very important that they feel comfortable and safe. And like I say, we'll be very happy to talk that through with them in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Let's go back to you, Heather. Fiona Edwards wants to know, how do we know that the estate agents, as in Leggett, is acting in our best interests?
Great question, Fiona. Thank you. It's hard to know. What I can say is that Leggett has grown exponentially over the last however many years, 25 years, I think. And the reason for that is that we are a solution-based, transparent and honest agency. We started off as an international estate agency, really dealing with the Brits. And we now have equal French to English. And the reason for that is because we really do give a very, very straight and, as I said, transparent service. All Leggett agents live where they work. So without doubt, it's very, very important to them that their clients are happy. I had someone knock on my door just 2 nights ago. Someone had recommended them and they didn't know my telephone number, but they knew where I lived. And someone came and knocked. We're very, very approachable, real people. And that does give you a level of security in the community that we will look after you and act in your best interests. It's a very hard one to quantify. I can only say that we are highly respected and frequently referred by our clients, and that's why we're growing so quickly.
Just on that, the question has come in and it's come up on the chat now from Mike Birchmore, because you obviously answered about the sales process. He says, will Leggett help if there are issues after the signing and taking of possession?
Yeah, I mean, we do. It does depend on what it is. I don't want to overpromise here. That's quite important. But if it's something that, say, for example, we have a term called vis cachet, which is when a problem has not been revealed to us by the vendor, we would help you. The notaire is truly responsible for that, but we will help. We don't ever leave people to flounder. It's just not a great thing. If it's something between you and the vendor, we may leave you to it, but generally not. We generally are there to help you. Would you agree with that, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. I was smiling because I've just just before coming on the webinar, I was on the phone to try to help one of my clients who purchased recently to try to get internet installed. And this was 4 months ago. Now, I do it at the time, but we need someone that speaks French. Yeah, well, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I think we go above and beyond. And yeah, I don't want to have to cross the road when I see one of my former purchasers or former sellers coming towards me. I care deeply about reputation and transparency.
We're heavily invested in looking after our clients, and to that end we have our own contracts department and notaire, as I mentioned earlier, and we really hardly ever get problems because we are so careful, so
I think what's important is that how do we know we're representing? Sorry, I don't know whether you're saying that as a buyer or a seller, but my answer is, well, we represent both the buyer and the seller, and we do it fairly and justly. We have two clients in every transaction. One's a buyer and one's a seller, and in the same way, I think that's pretty much common in most estate agency, isn't it? We represent both parties. We bring the two parties together, but we don't pick sides. We just make sure that it's fair for everybody, and that everyone's happy with the result at the end of the day. But the issue about transparency and this hidden fault, undeclared fault, in 140 sales, I've never had it. Because we are upfront, we check the property just before we go to the notaire's office, with or without the client. I checked one 7 o'clock in the evening. We were signing the next morning in absentia. The hot water tank was leaking. I told the vendors say, hey, it's our problem. We still own it tonight. Could have been, we haven't discovered it then. We discovered it the next, post completion. So we're very thorough. We live on the site and we're very thorough. So I think those type of attention to detail is what we pride ourselves in.
Okay, thank you both very much. Let's go to Fiona. Fiona, another one on visas. Daniel Constantine wants to know, can I work in France with a visitor's visa? Your mic again, Fiona.
Excellent question. One of the ones that comes up very frequently. There are two answers. So if you are employed by a company in France, or you have your own business in France, and therefore you're working on projects which are probably French or French clients, yes, you have to have a work permit. You cannot work as such on a visitor's visa. Now, if you own your business outside of France, or you're employed by a company outside of France, and you are working solely on projects and clients that have nothing to do with France, and you're working from home, you can work on a business visa, on a visitor's visa as such. So that's quite good news, but you have to be very careful about it. And then there is a second layer, which I'll just go through very briefly, which is on labor law rather than immigration law, that if you're moving here permanently, you probably don't want to be on a visitor's visa working as well, because you wouldn't probably have access to be able to apply for a 10-year permit or French citizenship if you wanted to go through French citizenship as such, because you have to justify that the main source of your income is in France and not elsewhere. So that's the reply on that. But we at CUM, we do an assessment at the start to run through that, to be absolutely certain that if you are working, could you work on a long stay visitor's visa?
Okay, great, thank you. When we say visitor's visa, Fiona, we're assuming this is the 90-day 180 visitor's visa.
So 90 days over 180 days is the Schengen ruling, which British nationals, as a couple of other countries as well, are what we call in the immigration industry, you are visa waived. So I'm British, I'm coming in to go skiing in the French Alps, I'm going to look at a house with Andrew. I don't need a visa to enter France, providing my stay in the Schengen countries remains under 90 days during a 180-day period, which is a rolling period. Please remember that. So it changes the whole time. A little bit complicated. There are very good tracking things online, and if somebody needed it, let me know. I can send that to you happily. After that, if you want to stay above those 90 days, which, yes, I'm sure that a lot of people who buy properties in the Alps, I see it with a lot of my clients who have properties or buying properties in the French Alps. They don't want to be limited, and they may have properties elsewhere, but they certainly don't want to be limited, and they don't want to suddenly find out at mid-March, oh, I can't come in any longer, I've reached my 90 days. They want to be able to make the maximum of the fact that they have a beautiful home up in the Alps, and they want to use it whenever they want, whenever they choose to, and therefore they would need a long stay, probably visitor's visa, providing they're not going to have a professional activity, as I previously explained, in France.
Okay, thank you. That sums it up. Thank you very much. Jason, Lawrence says, I've got various pension schemes that are active in the UK. How will I be taxed in France?
As an individual that's moving to France with different types of UK pensions, the first port of call would be the UK-France double tax treaty, just to establish what the rules are. And they pretty much follows the normal template, which is that if you have a company pension scheme, if you have a private pension scheme like a SIP, and also if you have the state pension, then they're always taxed wherever you live. Not where they're effectively sourced from. So if they're coming from the UK, they're taxed where you live. So if you're living in France, then France would have the taxing rights on those. The only one that has a slight difference is a government pension, which is where it's a pension for someone who may have been a teacher, may have been in the military, that kind of thing, may have worked for local government. They're always taxed, certainly from the template, are always taxed where the pension scheme itself originates from. So if they're working for UK government, the UK local government, then basically it's always going to be taxed in the UK regardless of where they're living. So that's the simple rules around those. In terms of France, France will treat UK pension schemes as a pension in France and will tax it according to its rules. If you are taking an annuity from the pension, then it's taxed much like it would be in the UK, taxed through the rate bands in France, which go through to pretty much the same top rate as the UK. So not a great deal of difference there. The slight difference is around the flexibility we have in the UK to do what we want with our pensions, which is you can take all of it out in one hit, you can take gradual drawdowns, or as I said, you can convert it to an annuity. Now, one of the things that we have is the ability to take 25% tax-free on a lot of our pensions at the outset. We always recommend that if you've got to do that, which the vast majority of people do, is do that whilst you're UK resident, don't do it once you're French resident. Because in the UK, that is a tax-free drawdown, the first 25% of the fund. If you do that once you're French resident, it's not potentially tax exempt. I say potentially because France does have a rule which basically says that the first, if you take a lump sum, then the first lump sum that you take from a pension scheme does have potentially a preferential rate of 7.5%. So there is a benefit there that can be used. You do see some French tax districts actually applying that on regular lump sums that people receive, but not always. You do get slightly different interpretations of the rule across different districts in France. But we certainly find with a lot of clients who say, I actually want to take all of my pension out in one hit, which some people do. Obviously, there are reasons for that. You would never recommend it to everybody. But then you can utilize that 7%, 7.5% to actually get those monies out at a very, very preferential tax rate and potentially use some other tax planning ideas in France for them to then live off that money in an incredibly tax efficient way, much more tax efficient than if they converted that pension into an annuity. So there's a lot that you can do around pensions for UK nationals moving into France.
Okay, great, thank you. Andrew, let's go to you. Paul Clifton wants to know, we're looking for property in the region when we find something, do we need a UK solicitor to represent us? We've obviously talked about the notaire in France, but do we need a UK solicitor to represent us?
Yeah, just to clarify, notary in France is what I would term as a conveyancing solicitor in the UK. The notaire purely deals in property and family law in France, so they sort of replace the solicitor. Very governed métier. Sorry, lost my words. Business industry. UK solicitor. I think I can understand. I've been to a lot of shows, property shows with Leggett, where there were seminars held by UK solicitors, and they normally say the answer I'm going to give, which is, I think if you're working with an agent who is British speaking, has the right mindset, and also from our point of view, when we prepare the documents, we prepare them, if we prepare a compris de vente, the initial stage that Heather talked about earlier, we prepare it with a paragraph by paragraph translation, so you know exactly what you're signing. We demystify the process, we remove all that doubt. I always say to my clients, I'm not replacing your legal representation at all. What I'm doing is explaining it in layman's terms. We work with really good notaires here. There's a British notaire based here in the heart of the Alps in Moutier. I work with him occasionally, and it's an absolute pleasure because of hearing the way that he explains things to people in their own language. We have a great network of English-speaking solicitors, but this chap is British. And you know, has, like a lot of us, taken the step to come and live and work here. I haven't come across the occasion where it's been necessary or helpful, I must admit. But at the end of the day, as buyer, you pay the stamp duty and the legal fees of the legal representation of the notary, and there is no requirement, in my opinion, you know, certainly. As long as it's well explained, and there is no requirement for a UK involvement. And again, the law keeps changing, particularly when we talk about apartment buildings. You know, a lot of the, not the issues about apartment, that wasn't the right word, but a lot of the considerations with an apartment building is, how's the building run? How's it been maintained over the last few years? How's it going to be maintained over the next few years? So we give all the information about the buildings. Will help. I'm not promising to translate the rules and regulations of a building that was established in 1957, but we'll tell you anything that's relevant. And you obtain all the information about the accounts, the financial state of the building, and any decisions that have been made over the last few years, if there's a sinking fund for future works, if works have been done over the last few years, etc. So I think all that element is very, very important, and we explain that. A solicitor could only get that if they know the buildings intimately, which unfortunately they can't. So I think, again, you know, the local knowledge that we have is worth a great deal.
Should we also just stress, Andrew and Heather, that obviously I think some people obviously buying from the UK use a solicitor because they're acting for them. What we need to probably stress is the notaire is acting for both sides. They are independent of this. It's not like they're trying to wangle some deal for the buyer or the seller. The whole point is they are government appointed and they are helping both sides in the actual transition process.
Yeah, that's really important, Andy. Thank you so much for bringing that up. There's another thing to say here as well. We don't have to use just one notaire. We can have two notaires, so there can be double representation. It doesn't cost any more. And if we ever feel that there might be a conflict of interest, we will do that. The notaires are highly governed in law. They represent government really locally, and ensure that everything's done properly, and that all the checks are done and so on, and that the finance is done properly. Everything is very careful. But if the remotest whiff of a conflict of interest, we will just get a second notaire for you at no extra cost. Or if the vendor's notaire has no English and we feel that that would be helpful, we'll get another notaire for you to represent you as well. So there's plenty of reasons why we might go for two notaires.
Okay, thank you. Paulette, let's talk about insurance. Stacey Thompson says, if we buy a rental property in the Alps that has regular snowfall, do we need to have a different type of house insurance cover?
Absolutely not. pretty much like the UK, it's based on the address, the postcode, even down to micro zoning. So just from the address, it will be on the database that yes, it's it's a property at high altitude, or it's a property next to a river, and there's going to be flooding, things like that. So that's already known. What you do need to take a different insurance, not different insurance, but be careful of the insurances if you're planning to rent the property out. Which I know a lot of people who buy second homes do that. So they'll let it out in the ski season, say. That's quite easy to deal with. We can put an extra clause on your property insurance. That just gives you that public liability insurance. So when the property is rented out, if there's any, I don't know, a tile falls off your roof and crack somebody on the head because you haven't maintained it properly, it will cover you for the public liability. That was a terrible example, wasn't it? And also, if, say, for example, you're going to run the property as a bed and breakfast, you're going to be like a host and provide meals. You also need to have a clause put in there in case food poisoning, which does happen. So there's lots of different things that you can put in the policy to tailor make it for whatever you're going to do with that property. Say, for example, you've got an apartment and you've got a large cave downstairs in the garage that you're going to have skis and things stored in. We can make sure that your belongings in the cave are covered for theft and fire, things like that. So kind of what we offer is when we go through a quote with a client, we will always do the quote over the phone with the client, because there's only so much you can get from when a client fills something in saying, oh, I want to insure this property. We have a real conversation with the client and find out what you're doing with the property. Are there any unusual features of the property? And we make sure that's all in the policy that we then offer you. And we also offer a summary of that policy in English, so you know what you're insured for, instead of just going, oh, I've gone on the internet, oh, that quote looks cheap, I think I'm covered, it's all in French, but I'm sure it's fine. We go through it with you and actually check that what you need to be insured for is insured, and that you understand what you're insured for. So don't worry about the heavy snow, we know.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, do you want to come in with this? Sorry.
Sorry, Andy, I just wanted to add something into Paulette's comments there, which I think is quite relevant to the buying process, is that when someone purchases a house or puts an offer in on the house, I've mentioned diagnostics are provided, and those would include any local risks, as Paulette said. And as long as those local risks are registered with the council office, which is known as the MARI, that will be on your insurance, and it's all covered for, because the local council office has plans in place to cover those risks. I just thought I'd add that in.
Well, as you've gone there, let's Phil Shotton has come up on the questions that Phil's here now. Phil, hello. He says, should we be concerned about the geo-risk links that now appear on French properties for sale, or are these for most properties for sale, or not just the Alps?
No concern. Sorry, Andrew, you go.
No, I'm very happy with that. No, I'm happy because I live in a flood zone. It used to be a flood zone, and I'm very comfortable with answering that. It's across France. Heather's mentioned, obviously in the Alps we have specific natural risks which we don't necessarily have we don't have elsewhere in France. Avalanche, potentially flooding, but not anything to be terribly worried about. One thing we don't have here in the Alps is clay soil shrinkage, because we're built on rock pretty much. It's the shrinkage and the movement of houses because of that, which is a natural risk, but that's one of the elements that you receive. And then the other part of that report is what they actually call technological risks. So if you happen to be close to, again, here in the Alps, it's not an issue, but if you happen to be close to, I don't know, chemical works or aerodrome, or that's an old-fashioned word, sorry, airport, sorry, that's what I meant. Then those are some of the other risks of either noise pollution or genuine pollution. We have a lot of hydroelectric here in the Alps, but it's very safe. I've got a river at my back garden, lived 20 odd years in this house. No thought of flooding. So no, they're applied to everybody. They're for full information. In certain resorts, they have reinforced some of the avalanche criteria. But again, that's where we will come in and say, yeah, that's a zone which could be under that type of risk. Without giving too much away as well, and without fighting anyone off, I have to say that we're also in a bit of an earth tremor zone, but that's because the Alps are young mountains. So, you know, if you're completely averse to the odd shake every 6 or 7 years, maybe not the Alps, but don't be surprised if it says that you're in a seismic zone 3. That comes with the territory, literally. Excuse the pun.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, let's go back to this money question then. Tracy Baldwin wants to know, if I use your company and transfer my funds into a holding account and then the purchase falls through, how easy is it to get my money back, and is there a penalty charge?
Okay, so yeah, this question is touching on something I mentioned earlier about the segregated bank accounts, the holding account. And for any viewers who perhaps aren't familiar, I think it's quite important to point this out. It's an important benefit of dealing with an FX company like Lumon, not just the competitive rates, but we have the ability to purchase currency and hold it here until it's needed. So if you were going to use the typical banking system, you're really forced to purchase the currency on the days that the payments are due. So from start to finish, French property, you could be talking a good 3 months from a deposit until the final act. If you're forced to put your payments through on those dates, you're obviously going to be quite limited in when you buy the currency, and you know, rates are moving up and down all the time. You know, that can be quite troublesome for clients. So yes, we have this holding facility, access to a euro segregated bank account for the client. We call it a wallet, and you can purchase the currency when it's a good day. Today's quite a good example. We almost hit 114 on sterling euro exchange rates. That's within 0.5 cent of the highest points we've had this year. So certainly for some of my clients, you know, today would have been a good day to purchase euros for their property. So as the question asks, you purchase your euros and then for some reason things might fall through. What do I do now? Well, there's no penalty. You don't lose your money. It's still there sat in euros. What you can actually do is convert it back into sterling, and we can help you in that process, try and help you a little bit with the timing of a transaction. Whilst you can't use our accounts for purely speculative purposes, where a sale is broken down and there's a need to convert back into sterling, we can certainly help you to try and do that in a cost-effective way by tracking the rates. But you know, that's not your only option. If your particular purchase has fallen down and you're still looking at other properties, then you can actually just hold the funds in the wallet. There's no charge to keep the funds in the wallet. There's no real time scales that we need to work to. Normally within a couple of years maximum, or that's you know, fairly rare that anyone would be holding funds with us for that long. So yes, you can just keep the funds here, continue your search. And if you don't want to do that, you can always open up a euro bank account yourself, transfer the euros there, and then of course they're in your possession, ready to be used in whatever manner you see fit if you do find a property in the future. So yes, if you do commit to a purchase early on of the currency, you're not just going to lose your money if things take a different turn. And there's quite a few options again that we can discuss with you to make sure it's working in your favour.
Okay, thank you. Heather, I've got a question for you, and there's one that's coming as well. So I'll try and see if we can cover them both. As I say, I like to cover people that are actually asking the questions here and now. But let's start with this one. Xavier Solomons wants to know, I'm reading that the worldwide property market is heading for decline. Is this the same in the Alps region of France?
Gosh, the good questions coming in tonight, I tell you. So Xavier, that's a fabulous question. This area, the Auvergne-Rhône Alps, but particularly the Rhône Alps, is extremely buoyant and strong. Why? Because we have skiing, we have lakes, and we also have cities. So we have Lyon, we have Annecy, we have Chambéry, Bourg-en-Bresse. I mean, many big cities that are thriving and contributing heavily to GDP. We've also got Switzerland on one side, Italy on another side. That actually makes us a great hub for commerce and tourism. So what happens is that this area usually remains buoyant long after other areas are starting to go into decline. And also this area recovers faster than other areas. And that has happened on the few occasions where unfortunately markets have crashed. Now, Where we are at the moment is very, very interesting. I'm going to just talk nationally here for a second. We've got so many things going on, right? In the world and in France, you know, inflation, bills going up, wars, you know, it is a tricky old situation. And in all of that, France has remained one of the absolutely most steady markets. And we've actually beaten Spain now for where tourists want to come to invest their money, as well as across the whole of Europe, France is where investors want to put their money. So France is very stable generally, particularly under Macron. He's a very good leader. He's a finance man, so he should be. But in this area, yeah, we have people coming from all around the world buying and selling, and it keeps the markets up. Of course, in difficult times, prices will fluctuate. Are we in those difficult times? Not at the moment, not here. The market is still strong. We're still selling. We've done the same as we did last year at this time. We had a small problem with the finances because of the banks not wanting to lend. The government's put some action in place to try and solve that. That seems to be working, so we're getting more financing coming through. And so this is also driving the market. The other thing to say is that people are looking for alternative lifestyles. What better place to be than here? We have cool mountain air, we have summer, lovely Mediterranean weather in the summer, but the cool night breezes. So many reasons for people to buy here that we're never really short of clients. I think that we will stabilize. In some areas of the Rhone Alps, we've stabilized a little bit, and I think that that will happen. Will we see a drop in prices? I don't think so, not quite yet. If it happens, it won't be until the summer, I think. And there's so many things being put into place to stop that happening. I think we could go through it fairly safely, but let's wait and see. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, so who knows?
Okay, let's do this next one then, because it's here. And Andrew, you can help with this one as well, as quickly as we can. Michelle Ward says, when would you suggest is the best time of year to look for a property in the Alps in order to be able to do the viewings, etc.?
There's often an assumption that property will come on at the end of the winter, and I don't think that's wrong. But to be honest, property comes on here all year round. People's minds are perhaps elsewhere in November, but we sell stuff in November and December. I find the autumn a very busy time. I think people sort of get home from a summer holiday and think about the winter holiday and realise that if they sort of get their act together and find that property they've always thought about, they could actually be having their winter holiday in that property. So I would say it's a busier time. I wouldn't say there's a quieter time particularly. I think we're sort of constant throughout the year, with a bit of a rush come September, October. So just, you know, one of the ways, one of the best ways is to sign up and get us to appoint us as a property finder. Tell us what you're looking for, appoint us as a property finder, and as soon as something comes on the market or we get a whisper of it, then we can get in touch. And you know, with the good transport links that we have, hopefully you can get out. But we'll do virtual tours. We still sold 12 properties on virtual tour here in Saint-Gervais last year, on virtual visits. And for some of the properties, because they're moving so quickly, that is what you need to do.
Okay, let's move to Fiona then. Fiona, a visa question. Constance Fraser says, are there requirements if you are a retiree?
So if you're a retiree and you have no professional activity in France, you would apply for the long stay visitors visas. It's relatively simple. There are three main criteria for that. You have to show that you have somewhere to live. You may not have already bought your property with Leggett. You may just be visiting. You may have rented something. Heather and Andrew might have said to you, well, we've got a lot of things coming up, but it's not going to be for a couple of months, or we've got something coming up, but it's going to be in 6 months' time. So you would rent something. or you could be staying with friends. That is also acceptable. So providing you have somewhere that you can show that where you will live when you arrive, that's one criteria. The second criteria is that you've got to justify that you have the financial capacity to live in France without working or opening a company in France. You will be signing off documents for that. That's going to be very basic for most people. It's going to be, as a retiree, your retirement fund, bank statements. Sometimes we also add in an income tax notice, and that's for the financial part. And then the last part, which you would go to Paulette for, is going to be the medical insurance, which is very important. This is not travel insurance. This is medical insurance for you moving to France because you are going to become a resident here. Now, if you're British and you're a retiree, you may apply for an S1 form and you may remain on UK national health as well.
Okay, well then, as you've almost preempted me there, Fiona, because I was going to ask a medical question, so we'll go to Paulette. Paulette, Daisy Morgan says, if I have an existing health condition that requires regular medicines and treatments, how can I be sure of receiving French state healthcare and private medical?
Okay, so I touched on this briefly earlier, that once you've lived in France for 3 months, you can apply for your social security number. You're not going to get it at 3 months, but you can apply. At the point when your social security number comes through, if you have, as I mentioned before, a long-term condition as listed on Amelie, you're entitled to 100% of the cost of that to be covered. Remember, in France, that healthcare isn't free at point of access, so it's not like the NHS. It's not where you go to the doctor and you never thought about the cost of healthcare or anything when I lived in the UK. However, I go to the doctor every month now for my blood pressure check, €25 every time. I do get that back. So I get part of it back from Social Security, normally within about a week, and then from my top-up mutual, probably 3 or 4 days after that. So it depends on your illness, whether you're entitled to 100% cover, so that you don't need a mutual top-up for that. Excuse me. And as I said earlier, don't be surprised if a doctor wants to re-diagnose you and send you for tests, and even put you on different medication that you're used to, say in the UK or the US or wherever you're coming from. You might actually end up on different medication, different strengths and things like that after being re-diagnosed. It is quite common. But yeah, as soon as you've got your French social security number, you're entitled for treatment for any medical condition. Just a quick one about mutual. Other than, I think we've got probably 52 different levels of top-up mutual, probably only the top 6 levels have a health questionnaire, and they're very expensive. No one ever signs up for them. So generally, your average mutual, there's no health questionnaire. So it doesn't matter that you've got an existing health condition. You're not going to be charged extra for the mutual top-up, because we don't ask. We don't even ask you. We don't put on a white coat and a stethoscope when we start to sign you up and start asking for details. We don't need to know at all. So you're not paying extra for that mutual top-up.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time. Just to let you know that, as you'll see on your screen there, that the panelist details are there in front of you, so you can contact them after this webinar. Their email addresses are there if you have any burning questions. I'm conscious that, Jason, we've left you a little bit alone there, so I'm going to quickly try and get this one in. Can I ask you a question about wills?
You can do.
Okay.
I'll try and answer it.
There's a question here from Yvonne Miller. She says, do you have to have a separate French will to leave the property to your child?
Relatively simple. You don't have to have, but in most cases we would recommend that you would have a UK will for your UK assets and potentially for your non-French assets as well, and you would have a French will for your French assets. And that purely is just from probate perspective, gets things done quickly, moves things along, and also just means that you're dealing with each set of assets individually. You would normally make sure as well that those wills don't cancel each other out, so that one doesn't kind of make sure that the other one is no longer valid, which can potentially happen. You have to we normally recommend we send someone off to a lawyer that would perhaps be doing both sides of those wheels, dealing with both of them, so that they can be done at the same time and they can factor in the elements that are required in both of them. It's become a little bit easier now with the European succession regulations that have been brought in, which make it easier for people who may want to try and reflect the way they're giving their assets in their UK will, where you have complete testamentary freedom in who you pass your assets to, who want to try and reflect that in their French will, which they may not have been able to do previously with the rules on forced heirship in France. There's a little bit more freedom there, but you still have to know what you're doing and what the consequences are from an inheritance tax perspective, not just from a succession perspective, but from what who you want to pass the assets to, what that's going to cost you from a succession tax perspective from both a UK and a French perspective, because you may go and live in France for 20-25 years, but you could still potentially remain UK domiciled, and it is domicile which determines your inheritance tax position in the UK. So you're going to have to sort things out from both points of view. Very, very complicated situation, and we would always recommend that you're looking for a lawyer that can deal with both the UK and the French side at once.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious that our hour is up. We always do this. So I try and get as many questions through as we can, and it never happens because obviously there are great answers for you. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I will ask everyone to say cheerio, and if there's anything that's burning that they wish to share with you, I'm happy for them to do that. We will have another webinar at the end of March, which will be a general one about the whole of France. This one has been about the Alps, but obviously questions about the Alps and questions about visas happen if you're buying elsewhere in France. It's helpful, hopefully, for people to hear our experts give their answers. So we'll say cheerio from Heather.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Say cheerio from Andrew.
Thanks for your time. Hope to see you in the Alps. It is snowing, I should say.
Oh yeah, I heard earlier that Andrew said it was snowing. Yes, hello. Say cheerio from Fiona.
Goodbye, everyone. Pleasure, and don't be deterred by difficulties on visas. We're here to help.
Okay, and Jason?
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening.
Paulette?
Yep, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.
And finally, Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thank you, all our panelists. Thank you, our viewers. And of course, if you like any more information, please contact any one of us and we'll be very interested to help out.
Okay, so as I said, at the end of March, we're back for a general one. The details will be available, and if you'd like to sign up and ask questions, I will do my best to answer those questions as best as I can. As I said, the details are there on the panel of all the experts now, so if you want to contact them via email, you can do. I will say cheerio, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.